Welcome back to 15 with Fosca, the podcast. My guest today is Jennifer Brunton. Jenny is a writer, editor, consultant, and keynote speaker. She is the author, among many other things, of the blog Full Spectrum Mama and the seminal text, The Actually Autistic Guide to Advocacy and The Actually Autistic Guide to Building Independence. She is an expert and one of the most respected voices in neurodiversity advocacy, and I couldn't be happier that she has taken time out of her incredibly busy schedule to sit down with us today and share her work and her story. Now, for full disclosure, she is also one of my oldest and dearest friends, and I won't say how long ago we met. We did meet, I think, like the first weekend of college. So it's been a while, but welcome to the podcast, Jenny.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, we're finally getting one of our many beautiful conversations on the air for others to listen into, because that's sort of the whole point of the shift in my podcast this season, where I'm highlighting authors and just super interesting people I know. And I couldn't not invite you to be on the podcast. So thank you again for coming.
Thank you.
So, for those who don't already know you or meeting you for the first time, how do you describe who you are and the work that you do in the world?
Well, I think you actually just did it better than me. Thank you. And made it sound really good. I mean, I'm a writer, I'm a speaker, I'm an activist, around mostly around neurodiversity and specifically autism. So that's my main gig. But I was thinking about sort of like what I'm doing vis-a-vis what you're doing, which is like I do something similar, which is like I kind of translate and facilitate between these worlds, between like the world of people who are autistic and the world of people who are neurotypical, who have these different neurotypes, and try to kind of create ease between them. And um I guess it's almost like between two cultures, right? Because we're moving away from identifying autism as a problem or a disorder or, something wrong with you, and moving toward it being an identity and a culture and just a little, and obviously everyone who's autistic is different, and we'll probably get to that later. But I just see myself as a sort of facilitator between these worlds as an autistic person who much of my life sort of quote passed as weird but neurotypical.
Yeah.
I have some privileges of education and some tools where I can fill that role pretty well.
I love how you described yourself and the work you do, because I think, if I think about how much the definition of autism and has changed and how much,
Mm-hmm.
progress we've made since you started this work, it's kind of unbelievable. The kind of work that you do every day, building understanding in addition to, the many other things that you do. So how did you start? I mean, what prompted you to start writing and speaking about neurodiversity and autism more specifically?
Well, again, try to give the short version. I think it's now maybe even 12 years ago, something like that. I was a single mom and I started a writing group with two other friends, and our group was called WIP, WYP, WIP, Write Your Piece, that
Oh,
WYP, or you would have to clean the other people's houses. So I had no idea what I was going to write, but I needed to write something, and I just wrote something. And initially, so I have one child who is biological child who is autistic, and by that point was around that time had sort of just been diagnosed as autistic. And then I have another child who was adopted from China who had some other challenges, some attachment disorder stuff that was really challenging. And they were both almost seemed like polar opposites. Like my son was, well, without going too deeply into it, they just seem like opposite kinds of beings. So I started the blog as full spectrum mama, not as the autism spectrum, but like this really huge spectrum of types of people with one child on kind of either end. And yeah, and then like bit by bit that got more followers and got more reads. I mean, there have been times where that has been getting read tens and tens of thousands of this year. I think I'm averaging about 30,000 reads a month. And um yeah, it's pretty popular. I'm not really sure why, because I don't do much with it and it's not monetized or anything like that, but it gets read a lot. And then I got more into the writing piece because someone who I had, I think, been interviewed on her blog, was writing a book and wanted someone who was autistic to write with her. And so we started working together and turned out to be a really, let me tell you, having a writing partner who you trust. And we were talking before began recording about people who just give 110%, like who really are just on it. Like both of us are like that. Both of us have really intense high needs, families, children, grandchildren. She doesn't have grandchildren, but she has 4 kids. Um, we both have a lot on our plates and we both always show up and always like maybe we're doing it in the middle of the night, but we're both always give 110%. So that's been wonderful. And then that just has kept kind of growing.
First of all, I mean, this is not a question, but you should be monetizing the blog because that's a really amazing readership. And so you should be doing something with it. This is just
Well,
friend to friend.
that speaks to some of the other things that that you have coming up, what we've discussed that we're going to talk about in this conversation, which is I have tried that. And when I haven't found a way to put ads on the blog that are acceptable to me. Because if you're doing a blog about autism, they're going to come up with they kind of I don't know how much power you have over choosing what they put, but the 1 or 2 times that I've been like, let me just play with this, they've put ads about curing autism on my blog, and that is the
Mm.
opposite of what I want on my blog. So there may be, that may have evolved and I can look into it more, but it's definitely like something that was horrifying and that I stopped immediately.
Let's look into it more though. Let's
Yeah.
see, because that is horrifying and that's
Yeah.
exactly like that's antithetical to every like your life's work. So
Right.
absolutely we don't want that.
Yeah.
I'm glad that I want to stay with full spectrum mama just for a second. And
Yeah.
I don't know why I didn't know that. I mean, I read it but I didn't know the origin story
Yeah.
too well.
Yep.
And I love it. And maybe that's why it has such wide readership because it is appealing to people, to parents, to,
Yeah.
because of the full spectrum, if
Yeah.
you will.
Yeah.
Um, but I do want to specifically speak about there was one piece you wrote that actually it rewrote the DSM-5 autism criteria, which is like,
Yeah.
hello, like
Yeah.
unbelievable. Can
Yeah.
you can you talk a little bit about what motivated that piece in particular and the impact that it had? Because that's huge for those who don't know. That's huge. So
Yeah. And if you read it, I feel like, so the original language in the DSM-5 is really, really othering and really discriminatory and really, I think, painful for most autistic people to read, or anyone, I think, who
yeah,
would read it, who is identified by those criteria. So I took the criteria and I just shifted them into non uh, othering, non marginalizing, non discriminatory language. So where it would say, excessive repetition or something, I would say like intense focus, like things that, there are things that autistic people value about ourselves that the original criteria really um denigrate, and so it was I do a lot of consulting and speaking about professional paradigms. I gave a keynote about it maybe a year and a half ago or something, and I'm giving another one this spring about professional paradigms, moving this spring specifically about shifting the stigma around special education. Um, so much of the language is so painful and it doesn't need to be. Like you can say difference instead of disorder. You can say, I don't know, I probably changed 30% of the language, but I kept so much of it in because, okay, diagnosis can be helpful. I mean, diagnosis can give us like a lot of tools to work with. It can give us access to educational adjustments, to different kinds of supports if we need them. Like, I don't think there's inherently something wrong with having criteria for a neurotype. You can have criteria for a neurotypical neurotype. Idea for a next post, right? DSM-5 diagnosis of a neurotypical person.
yeah.
No joke, right? I think so. I'm trying to sort of remove stigma with a lot of this language stuff. And I think, like you said, even in the last, like, certainly since I was a child, but also even in the last 10, 15 years, I think there's been a huge reawakening, or not reawakening, sorry, awakening of knowledge around
Awakening.
neurodiversity. And so much so that, I think, did you mention that we went to college together? Yes. So
Did.
we went to college together, and as
Yeah.
the greatest thing that ever happened, my daughter is now at our wonderful college, and her roommate, her first year, is autistic, and they're still best friends. But it's like she didn't even she didn't know that her roommate was autistic when they moved in together. It was a triple, and they have one other roommate, and they're all like family now. Um, but it was she once they moved in together, she was so open. Everyone's very supportive. There's like a neurodiversity club at Bryn Mawr and Haverford. Like, it's just a whole thing now. So I think there has been progress, but I think there's a really long way to go, still. So a lot of the language is one of the things that really bothers me. It's also, we developed some principles for affirming advocacy and activism and self-advocacy. And one of the main principles is language. Like, language has impact. Language shifts the way people think about things. So if you think of autism as a neurotype, it's very different from thinking about it as a like a disorder, right?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
yeah.
I love that you focus on language and you focus on sort of a culture shift,
Yes.
and really sort of spinning the narrative, because
Yeah.
that's fundamentally what you did and also what you do
Yeah.
with your work. And there has
Yeah.
been, I mean, even if I was listening to a podcast the other day, I can't remember which one, but it was about autism and how it was about the sort of the controversy of surrounding diagnoses, because, oh, there are so many autism diagnoses now. But
Yeah.
that's that's because there's so much on the spectrum as
Yeah.
well. So, for example, somebody who has Asperger's, is, we would have in the past identified in a certain way, if you will. But
Right.
if I think about how when we were growing up, if autism was mentioned, it
Yeah.
was always associated with something extremely dark. I mean,
Yes.
extremely
Yes.
extreme, if you will.
Right.
So,
Right.
sort of also the sociologist in you, because you are
Yes.
a sociologist who's
Yeah.
paying very careful attention to the way language influences us in in the society we live in, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And disability is another one of those
Yeah.
words that I still use the word disability and disabled, but I use it with the idea that we're using the social model of disability, meaning it's not so that there's anything wrong with or lacking in a person who is disabled, but they are disabled by the things that happen in our culture, by the materials in our environments, by the relationships that don't situate them as a full, whole person.
Yeah.
Right. So disability to me is very real, and a diagnosis can help with that, with adjustments and such. But I use those words very in a very specific way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you also, I think you mentioned a question or two ago about tools as well. So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and I want to talk about your books, because your books are really tools. I mean, they're
Yeah.
handbooks, if you will.
Yes. Yeah. They're
So,
they're very
right? I mean,
practical.
they're
Yep.
really
Yep.
practical
Mhm.
handbooks,
Yeah.
which is revolutionary, and we need this,
Aw.
right? Well, no, because
Thank you.
it
Yeah.
helps. It's not only because not only are they tools for the people who need to use them, they're
Yeah.
tools for the people who are educators, who are in the world,
Yeah. Oh
whoever,
yeah. Yeah.
parents,
Yes.
employers. Hopefully, we'll
Yeah.
talk about that a
Yeah.
little later.
Yeah.
But tell me a little bit about, you mentioned your writing partner as well, but tell me more about how the books were born.
Oh, so yeah. My co-author for the first book, she runs a blog called Learn from Autistic People. She herself is neurotypical. She has a husband, son, and brother who are autistic. And what she does on her blog, and I highly recommend it for any listeners, is she interviews autistic people about their lives. And so she had interviewed me, and what she was hoping to do with the first book was turn it into to basically use a lot of the wisdom from her interviews
Mhm.
to write a book about advocacy that would actually be affirming and empowering and inclusive. And so she was somewhat into that process when she contacted me, and then we just worked really well together to get through the second one. And then we used, both of us have sort of a lot of contacts in the autism community, which is not at all a monolithic community. I mean, everybody has different opinions. We're not, we're all different, but we have both had a lot of contacts. So for the second one, we we set up a survey, like a Google form survey, and sent that out to a lot of people, and had people send it out to their friends, et cetera. And so, and what we do is we kind of discern theme, like we try to be led by our respondents. Like we don't have an agenda. We're trying to see, like, what do people like. For example, in the second one, which was the Guide to Building Independence, there were things that I learned in that book. Like, I didn't know. There are things,
Yeah.
adulting came to me in very different ways than it might for the average neurotypical person. And so so what we do is, I think, sort of like you said a second ago, like it's almost like a sociological process. Like, we're looking at this and we're saying, what are the themes here? And what are some, we integrate a lot of people's own words, and, we say, like, what are some things that will really express this really well? And we organize it into, for example, for the second one, we just went from like personal and family stuff in the home, and we just began to telescope out. So next it was school, and then it was work, and then it's public spaces, and and then it's our last section of second book. Our second book was too long, so we had to, our publisher said we couldn't do it that long. So we kind of bullied them into letting us put the entire final third of, or it's about a third of the book, but it's the fourth section, that entire section online for as a free resource. And so that section is like social, cultural, and political advocacy, and sort of like trying to make changes in that world, ways to get education, ways to know your rights, ways to become an activist or an ally. And yeah, and why that relates to building independence is that, a lot of neurotypical people, or people in general, don't see the level of interdependence that we count on, that we take for granted. Like, there are so many ways that our society helps neurotypical people and people in general. So for example, I'm even talking about like roads, I'm talking about schools, I'm talking about libraries. Like, all of these things are a kind of help, right? So when autistic people might need adjustments to those things, or different kinds of things, I think that there's a shift that goes on in the mind, where you're like, wait, I'm not asking for something special, because we're always often othered because we're different and we need
Yeah.
something different. And it's like, there are so many people who might need these things. And one of the places that's really responding to this is libraries. Like,
Hmm.
libraries were mentioned by so many of our respondents in both books as safe spaces, as spaces that provide refuge for autistic people, because there's a quiet space. A lot of them have like sensory things, a lot, so. And libraries, I've this year I must have given 20 library talks, and every single one was just full of like wonderful weirdos. Like, libraries are such a wonderful space. So anyway, I think I went off topic, sorry.
No, 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 you didn't actually, because it segued
Okay.
perfectly. No, of course not. No, because I want to talk about your work as a keynote. I want to talk about a keynote speaker. I want to talk about the kind of things you're going to people and talking about, and also the kind of groups that you're addressing. You just mentioned that you have given a lot of talks in libraries, but I
Yeah.
know you've had some really important recent keynotes that you've
Yeah.
done, and you have a few coming up. I just want to know what kind of, again, who's the audience and what are you talking about?
Yeah. So let's see. For the keynote, so yeah, I've probably given about 1 million library talks and a bunch of school talks, but the keynotes have been for, I did a keynote for, well, I did one at Columbia. That was for the inaugural Disability Alumni with Disabilities Summit, but I did can't remember what that. I did one for Autism Connections, which is a huge conference here in Massachusetts, but I think brings people from kind of all over. And that was largely for like parents
Hmm.
and some. it was, I would say mostly parents, but with some, self-advocates also, of course, and then also some professionals. I did one at UMass for their disability summit that was about shifting professional paradigms. And that was an audience of students, but students who, and faculty, but students who would be going into the field as professionals, as speech language pathologists or, different kinds of professionals in the field. And then the ones I'm doing this spring, I'm doing one at an international conference for neurodiversity, ICANN Canada, that one. And that one is going to be all kinds of people, parents, professionals, educators, self-advocates. And that one is going to be on independence, building independence.
Okay.
And I'm doing one for the Massachusetts Special Education Summit. That's the one on shifting stigma around special education. And I can tell that I have plenty to do there because I just got the announcement of like calling for people to apply to speak at it and, saying that I was the keynote speaker and blah, blah, blah. And they called it the SPED conference. So already like, no, like kids make fun, use that word in such a derogatory fashion. And how do you
Yeah.
not know that? I mean, I'm not criticizing them. I'm sure all those people, their heart is in the right place, but like, come on now. Like, you don't know that SPED is like sped, sped. Like, my son would come home crying, or my daughter, like
Yeah.
it's so, yeah, there's still plenty of progress to be made.
You again, thank you for perfectly leading me into my
Oh,
next
good.
question. So we've talked about the fact that thankfully there is more of a culture around it. You're one of the people who is building knowledge. You are going out there and really making changes in the way neurodivergent people are out in the world. Okay.
Yeah.
What still what do you still think might be some of the misconceptions around autism or neurodiversity, or what? I know that a lot more work needs to be done, but
Yeah.
let's start with some of the misconceptions maybe.
So okay. Uh I'll start with a little story. I took my granddaughters to the doctor not so long ago, and I was trying to get my son, who's their father, to kind of take care of the forms. Those giant piles of forms. I don't know if they do that in Italy, but in the US, you come in, there's like 30 pages for each kid. So my son had filled them out, but it was a lot. And they said, "Oh, I think you missed." And this is a wonderful physician's assistant. Like she's got purple hair. She's fantastic. She works only with kids. Like she's fantastic. And she's like, "Oh, I think you forgot to fill out this form. We just want to rule out autism." And I was kind of like, "Huh, well." And then I just like looked at her. I was like, "Look, I'm autistic. My son's autistic. The mom is probably autistic. The girls are probably autistic. We're not trying to rule it out." Like, and then I brought her my books. Like, so I think that the biggest misconception that still remains in a lot of areas, and even people that you would think would be more educated, is that there's something wrong with us and that it's bad. Um, I think the other main ones are probably like people do not typically see AFAB, like assigned female at birth, autistic people as autistic because we present a little bit differently.
Yeah.
And then, so people think like it's all like young men are all the autistic people. And also a huge one that I find is that a lot of people think that autism is either a psychological or an intellectual disability, and it is not. I mean, they can, just like with everyone else, they can occur with autistic people, but it's not at all. And many non-speaking autistic people, once they have access to communication devices, and you find out, oh wow, this person is like Alan Turing, like we're typically actually of above average intelligence. So I
Mhm.
don't know. I mean,
I
again, there's also the savant stereotype that we have to be a genius, and we don't have to be a genius either, but we are not inherently intellectually delayed in any way. Yeah.
oh, I want to thank you for telling that story because I think it's such a simple story that speaks volumes
Yeah.
about how we are so conditioned to think that it's something we need to rule out as opposed to something we need to embrace,
Yeah. Yep.
right? And
Yeah.
so I it's so crucial that we learn how to use our language better, that we understand
Yeah.
um, the nuances, the
Yeah.
beauty of our diversity, and
Yeah.
I think we're finally kind of coming to that cultural shift, but where do you see your work um, hitting the hardest? In other words, where are you trying to really, is it in the schools? Is it in the workplace? Is it for families? Is it all of the above?
Absolutely, like my heart, in my heart of hearts, I am trying to reach myself as a child, my son as a child. Like I'm trying to reach autistic people themselves.
Yeah.
So I think that probably I have more impact among like parents and professionals because they're the ones who's like, oh gosh, and I might be leading into your next question, who knows? Where they're like, okay, what can I do about this person who's in my life who's autistic? You know,
Yeah.
like how can I help them or change them or whatever? And they see our books or, blog or whatever, and then they're like, oh, okay, this is not quite what I expected, like maybe I shouldn't try to fix them. So I'm definitely trying to get those people. But above all, I love that in our books they're entirely driven by autistic voices and
Yeah.
autistic voices that sure, they're calling out plenty of things that are wrong, but they're also proud and they're also happy and they're complex and full whole people with positives and negatives about their lives, but
Like
plenty of
everyone.
positive. Yeah, like everyone.
All of
Right,
us, like, thanks,
exactly, exactly. Yeah.
And I mean, looking at the neurodiversity movement right now, what makes you most hopeful about the future, about Ernie's future, about your future, about your beautiful granddaughters and their future?
I feel like as much as social media has so many issues and I think has created a lot of problems in some ways, I
Yeah.
think that the for the autistic younger community like Gen Z and below, like they're connecting online and feeling less lonely and creating their own little mini revolutions. I mean, there are a lot of influencers who are autistic who are just completely out there and like just, embracing it. And that gives me a lot of hope. That gives me a lot of hope because I think one of the things we've kind of advocated for, my co-author and I talk about in my talks, is like a lot of autistic people have different kinds of friendships. Like they don't necessarily have friends who are the same age or the same gender or, so it's really allowed autistic people to connect with each other, because there might be not be another autistic person in my neighborhood. I mean, there might be with more and more diagnosis, but there's definitely another autistic person online, and people are connecting a lot that way.
Well, that makes me really happy to hear because, I do it as well. We tend to demonize social media and only look at the bad things about it.
Right,
But I
right.
think finding community or making something visible
Yeah.
or
Yes.
I'm using this, I'm
Yes.
putting air quotes here, but
Yes. Yeah.
normalizing
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
neurodiversity is
Yep.
fundamental. And I think we
Yeah.
underestimate how good it must feel to see someone who what for whatever reason speaks to you and
Yeah.
with whom you connect, even if it's,
Yes.
someone who's
Yeah.
across the world. I think it makes
Yeah.
us feel less alone and
Yes.
a little
Absolutely.
more a little more understood.
Yes. Yeah.
You
Exactly.
talk a lot in your work about the fact that you're neurodivergent and your child is neurodivergent. He's not a child anymore, but
But
they're always our babies,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
We're still babies anyway. So,
Mhm.
well, so what would you say to parents who have just got like what would be your best piece of advice to parents who have just gotten an autism diagnosis for their child?
So this is another simple one, but I think it's really important to remember. I'll say two things. One is remember that it's still the exact same child you had the day before. Like
Yeah.
that was a piece of advice that I got early on. And I was like, because you start to think, oh my God, it's this, is that, is this, that. And then, realize like this is your kid. Like you're with all the wonderful things that they already have about them and all the pain in the butt things and all of it, it's still the exact same kid. They just have a diagnosis now. And we've talked about diagnosis earlier, that obviously it's complicated, but if we shift some of the implications around the language and we just see it as bringing tools and adjustments and access, that's really different from diagnosis as labeling and othering. So that takes some of the stigma away. And then I would say the other thing I would say is increasingly there's a really good body of information that is autistic driven information around this neurotype. And that would be the second biggest big piece of advice. If I could only offer two, those would be the pieces. It's still your same child, love your child. And number two, seek out information that's not driven by quote unquote experts who are not autistic. Like
Yeah.
you, not to say like you have to completely avoid that, but go first to people who actually are autistic because we're out there, we're scientists, we're professionals, we're psychiatrists, we're teachers, we're writers. I'm not trying to sell my books. Get my books, but get something like it. That's fine. We have free discussion guides of both books that basic online that you can download for free that basically summarize the entire books. Like you don't even have to buy the books. Like just look for empowering, affirming information, not stuff that's trying to scare you and get your money.
And also buy your books. I mean,
Okay, okay.
really, yeah,
I'm a
buy your books.
risk.
So my last question for you, because I know you have to run off, is what's next for you?
Oh, well, we're working on our next book.
Yay, that was what I was
Yeah.
hoping you would
Yeah,
say.
yeah. So we are, and we already have commitments from Temple Grandin, Yen Perkis, like some of those may or may not be familiar names to you, but we have five or six, it's the only people we reached out to, people who have already committed to contributing to this book. And the book is, it's going to be called, so far, working title, What Sustains You? The actually autistic book of comfort and wisdom. So it's like we actually Jenna and I both faith is a big part of both of our lives. And we started, and then in the podcast that we do, which is Neuro Awesome Life podcast, with our third person is had been raised Christian scientist, almost like not that all Christian scientists are very intense, but her family was very intense, and she um turned away from that and has a lot of feelings and thoughts about that. So we started talking a lot about faith, and we decided initially we've never thought we would write a religious book. It's not religious at all, but it's about what are the things that sustain you in your day-to-day life? What do you trust? And it's for autistic people, so that might look a little different, right? We're systems thinkers, right? So a lot of people, a lot of us have systems that kind of get us by. Some of us, but we're also like open to stories, like a story of something that kind of shifted you into a place where you helped you get through hard times, or something that you return to again and again. So it's kind of a broad idea of sustenance, and as like sort of like a resource for autistic people and the people who care about them to return to, words of wisdom, comfort, but realistic, again, like all our stuff. Like, let's not pretend this is wine and roses, never mind everything that's going on in the world right now.
Yeah.
Everything. So yeah, so that's what we're doing next. Pretty
That
excited
sounds
about it.
No, it's phenomenal. I love first I love the title. I love the whole premise of the book.
Yeah.
And I mean, not only do I wish you the best of luck, first of all, I can't wait to read it, but also like that I feel could be applicable to a huge audience. It's
Yes.
not at
Yes.
all in any way, right? And
Yeah.
it's something we do
Yeah.
need right now. I didn't want to talk too much about the world. I didn't, because I
Yeah.
wanted, I just wanted to have this wonderful conversation with you, and I'm so glad we did it. And I didn't
Yeah.
want to talk
Thank
about
you so
it.
much.
Well, I mean, we could talk for hours and we can't, but I didn't want to talk about the ugliness of the world. I didn't want to
Yeah.
talk about all of the bullshit that has been
Yeah.
said
Yeah.
recently about autism
Oh
and
my, I know. We're
right,
not on a registry yet.
yeah, exactly. So we won't go there. I love the hopefulness of this book because it's what we all need right now. We need to pay a little more attention to this. It's something we tell each other all the time. We have a very tight friend group. We've been friends since our first weekend of college. And what we do, we just support each other and love each other unconditionally in this life. And we
Yeah.
sometimes it's hard to remember those things that do sustain us.
Right. Right.
Friendship
Yeah,
is a huge one,
absolutely. Yes.
and
Yeah,
thinking about those things as
yeah,
a reminder to all of us,
yeah.
and call it whatever you want. It could be, your faith in something bigger. It doesn't have to
Right,
be
right, exactly, yeah,
necessarily just even
yeah,
your own beliefs that everything will
yeah,
work out, or whatever it is that
yeah.
gives you comfort. But thank
Yes.
you, because this sounds like a phenomenal book, another phenomenal book.
We're excited. We're excited
As
about
you
it.
should be, as you should be. And that kind of wisdom, again, that I think in a world where it feels very easy to get lost and to get, to feel very, without
Powerless.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. And
yeah.
so, but exactly. And so I just wish you the best of luck. I think your books are phenomenal. I love the
Thank
work that you're
you.
doing. I am so proud of what you've done and what you do for so many people. And I hope you'll come back on the podcast and we can have another talk about your books or about all of the other things that we tend to talk about. But
Watch out.
yeah, watch out exactly.
Aw.
I'm really grateful to you for sharing your work with our listeners.
Thank you so much. This has been really, really, really fun and really thought-provoking. Yeah. Can I ask you one question?
Yeah, I knew you'd ask me a
Yeah.
question. I knew you couldn't
Does this
resist.
resonate for you? Like, do you feel like where you are now that things are progressing sort of similarly? The things that I'm talking about, like, do you feel like there's more awareness and acceptance of differences in Florence, in Italy in general, that it is progressing?
Here's everything's a little slower.
Yeah.
So I think we're not quite there yet. But
Yeah.
there is definitely, I mean, compared to even just 10 years ago, I would
Yeah.
say, just looking at my daughter and, looking at Jada and looking at her school and yeah. I mean, we're again, this is not, it's a long road. Um,
Yeah.
and there have been a bunch of roadblocks that we don't
Mhm.
need to name, but there has been a little bit of unfortunately, there has been some backtracking, but I feel like we really are on our way. Um,
Yeah.
but again, yes, it's taking a little longer than I think you and I are very idealistic. I think
Yeah.
we talk about this a lot too, but like, growing up in the 70s and eight, and then, when we got everything it just felt so like warm and fuzzy at a certain
And
point.
things are getting better, like
And
things were
then
getting
things were
absolutely getting
getting
better. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this is like a topic for another
Yeah.
podcast. But
Right.
we're
Deep breaths.
I'm so I'm you and I are both, if not, we wouldn't do the work that we do.
That's true.
We
That's
would have
really
just,
true. Yeah.
we would have done something very different with our
Yeah.
lives. And
Yes.
so
Yes.
I believe in the beauty of humanity.
Yeah.
I still
Yeah.
believe that. And I embrace that. I always have. Like I
Yeah.
love how human beings are,
Yeah.
and every human being. I'm really like very, I don't know, loving that way, if you will. But yeah, but I worry about humanity. I worry about society. Yeah, it keeps me up at night,
Yeah.
keeps us up
Yep.
at night. So, but
Yeah.
on that note, we are going to get there. And it's thanks to people like you
Aw,
who
and
are
you.
doing, thank you.
And
But
you.
we're crusaders for, for good in the world to,
And connection and
yeah,
yeah. Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
And lifelong friendships.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much, Fosca.
Oh, and wait, Jenny, where
Oh,
can everyone
yeah.
find you? Where can everyone find you
Oh,
online?
okay. Let's see. So, books are available anywhere. The actually autistic guide to independence or advocacy, and then my blog is Full Spectrum Mama at blogspot.blogspot.com. My website is jebphd.com. That's all my stuff.
Perfect. And
Thank you.
we'll put everything in the show notes so people can find you and buy your books and have you come and speak.
Yay! Thank you.
Okay. Thank
Thank you.
you. Take
All right.
care.
Yep.
Bye bye.
Bye.